A pregnant black woman was resting in the park until a cop did something unthinkable, but he had no idea who was watching. Subscribe for the full story and comment where you're watching from. The sun cast a golden glow across the wide-open spaces of Highland Park, where the laughter of children echoed faintly in the air and families lounged under the shade of tall oaks. The air buzzed with summer calm, as if the world had taken a deep breath and paused. Among the people moving leisurely through the park was Tiffany Monroe, a black woman in her early 30s, her round belly pressing softly against her sundress. She walked slowly, each step careful, her hand occasionally resting protectively on her stomach. The heat was draining, and her legs ached more with every passing minute. She had been looking forward to this outing, a brief escape from the cramped apartment and hospital visits, a chance to enjoy fresh air and the sounds of life before her due date arrived. Alone, but determined, she made her way toward a bench not far from the fountain, where ducks occasionally waddled across the grass. With a slow exhale, Tiffany lowered herself onto the bench, wincing slightly as the pressure shifted. She leaned back, hand again on her belly, and looked around. Everything appeared peaceful. Children ran by chasing bubbles, couples strolled hand in hand, and a man played soft jazz on his saxophone near the edge of the plaza. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythm of her baby's kicks, the soft flutter of life that gave her both strength and fear. It was the kind of moment she wanted to savor, simple, fleeting peace. But the peace didn't last. From her left, heavy footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. A shadow passed over her face, and Tiffany opened her eyes to see a police officer standing just a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes fixed on her with narrowed suspicion. He was white, mid-40s, and his badge read K. Riley. His gaze was sharp, not curious, but accusatory, as if he had already decided something about her just by looking at her. "You okay there, ma'am?" he asked, though his tone didn't suggest concern. It was flat, clipped, and hard. Tiffany straightened her back slightly and gave a polite nod. "Yes, officer. Just catching my breath. I'm pregnant, and walking in this heat isn't easy." Riley looked her over slowly, his lips twitching at the edges, not with a smile, but something closer to contempt. "Uh-huh. And where exactly are you headed?" She hesitated, unsure why she needed to explain herself in the middle of a public park. "Nowhere special, just enjoying the park. I needed to sit down for a minute." "Do you live around here?" he asked, the question sharp now, invasive. Tiffany's eyes narrowed slightly, and she tried to keep her voice calm. "Yes, just a few blocks away." He stepped a little closer. "You got ID on you?" "Excuse me?" she asked, her brows furrowing. "ID," he repeated, tapping the side of his belt. "You got any?" "I don't understand," she said, her voice tight. "Why do I need to show you ID for sitting on a bench?" Riley scoffed, shaking his head slowly. "We've had complaints. Loitering, suspicious activity. Gotta make sure everything's in order." "I'm not loitering," Tiffany replied more firmly now. "I'm resting. Because I'm pregnant." "That's so?" he said, glancing at her belly and then back up at her face. "Plenty of people fake stuff to avoid being questioned. You wouldn't believe the things I've seen." Anger flared in her chest. "Are you saying I'm pretending to be pregnant?" "I'm saying I've seen people do worse," he replied, taking another step closer. "Now show me some ID or move along." She reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out her wallet. Her movements were slow, not out of defiance, but because of the weight she carried, the fear that twisted in her stomach tighter than any contraction. As she handed him her ID, He snatched it with a jerk and looked it over with exaggerated scrutiny, then looked at her again as if trying to find a lie in her eyes. "Doesn't say anything about being pregnant here," he muttered. Tiffany stared at him in disbelief. "Why would it?" He ignored her. "You on any medications? Drugs? Anything that might impair your ability to think clearly?" She blinked. "No, I'm pregnant." "You said that already." He handed back the ID roughly. "Don't get smart with me." Around them, a few people were beginning to notice. A mother with a stroller paused a few feet away. A jogger slowed down, earbuds pulled out. No one intervened, but eyes were watching. Phones were not yet out, but the air had changed. Tiffany could feel it, the weight of suspicion, of fear, of vulnerability. "I just want to sit," she said again, softer now because her throat was tight. "I'm not bothering anyone." "Then you can sit somewhere else," Riley snapped. "This isn't a rest stop." He reached down and grabbed the handle of her purse, tugging it toward him. "You got anything in here I should know about?" "Don't touch my things," she cried, jerking the bag back instinctively. It happened fast, too fast. In one sudden motion, Riley reached forward, gripping her wrist tightly. Tiffany gasped, her other hand flying protectively over her belly. The officer shoved her shoulder, pushing her back against the bench as if to restrain her. She cried out, not in defiance, but in pain and desperation. "What are you doing?" she screamed. "Stop resisting," he growled, even though she hadn't moved beyond trying to protect her unborn child. Then came the moment that would haunt her. As she tried to shift her body upright, one of Riley's boots struck her shin, hard. The pain shot up her leg like fire. She recoiled with a yelp, clutching her stomach as she curled into herself. A gasp rippled through the small crowd. A teenage girl across the path dropped her phone, her eyes wide. "You kicked her!" someone shouted. But Riley, unfazed, turned toward the onlookers. "Back off. Official police business. She's resisting." "She's pregnant," someone yelled. "I don't care," Riley said flatly, turning back to Tiffany. "This ends now." She couldn't move. Not from fear, but pain. Tears streamed down her face as her breath came in shallow bursts. Her hand pressed desperately to the side of her belly, praying that the baby was okay, that nothing had torn or ruptured. And then a new voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" It wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, but it was sharp, British, and unmistakably commanding. Riley turned, irritation painted across his face. The man striding forward wore jeans, a black t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low, but his posture, his stride, his face as the cap came off, were instantly recognizable to almost everyone there. Jaysen Statham, the action star, the fighter, the man who'd saved 1,000 characters in 1,000 movies, was now walking straight toward Tiffany and the officer with a look on his face that meant trouble. Some people gasped, others grabbed their phones. The entire park seemed to collectively hold its breath. Jason's jaw was tight as he stopped a few feet away from the officer. His eyes dropped to Tiffany, then to the bruising grip on her wrist, then to her stomach. He turned his gaze back to Riley. "You just kicked a pregnant woman," he said, voice low but filled with fury. "Are you out of your bloody mind?" Riley straightened, clearly thrown off. "Back off. This doesn't concern you." Jaysen took a slow step closer. "It concerns me now." Tiffany looked up, dazed, confused, and in pain, but as her gaze met Jason's, she saw something different than fear or pity. She saw fire, a stranger who wouldn't walk away, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for justice. The park, moments earlier filled with summer cheer and lazy joy, had gone silent. The only sound was the distant rustling of leaves and the tension-filled breath of those witnessing what was quickly becoming a confrontation unlike any they had expected to see that day. Jaysen Statham stood firm, his presence unmistakable now. The cap was gone, revealing the world-famous face recognized across continents. His eyes never left Officer Riley, who still gripped Tiffany's wrist but now with far less confidence than before. Jaysen's body was coiled, not threatening but alert, the posture of a man who knew exactly how to dismantle a threat if it came to that. And Riley, still too full of his own authority, had not yet fully processed the reality of who stood before him. "I told you, back off," Riley snapped again, his voice sharper, more defensive. "You're interfering with police business." Jaysen's voice was calm, dead calm. "You put your hands on a pregnant woman. You kicked her. You didn't ask if she needed help. You didn't de-escalate. And now you're trying to act like that's standard procedure?" Riley's mouth opened to answer, but his voice caught as more onlookers stepped closer. Dozens of phones were out now, faces were grim, eyes fixed on him. The officer's usual armor of authority was cracking under the weight of public scrutiny and one very famous witness. "I don't care who you think you are," Riley said, puffing his chest slightly. "Step back now or you'll what?" Jaysen interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it hit like a hammer. "You'll arrest me? For telling you not to assault a defenseless woman?" Tiffany, still clutching her stomach and trembling, looked up at Jaysen through tear-blurred eyes. "Please, don't let him take me," she whispered. Jaysen crouched beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You're okay now," he said quietly. "I've got you." Riley took a step forward, trying to regain control of the situation. She resisted. "I had every right." "No," Jaysen said, standing again. "You had every opportunity to ask what was going on, and instead you chose violence." Another voice rang out from the side. "I recorded everything," a woman said loudly, holding up her phone. "You kicked her. You never even asked if she was okay." "And I got it too," a teenage boy added, stepping forward with his phone camera still rolling. "You shoved her and accused her of faking being pregnant." Riley turned, looking around at the sea of cameras and angry faces. His jaw clenched. He reached for his radio. "Need assistance at Highland Park," he said tersely into the receiver. "Crowd is becoming hostile. Suspects refusing to comply." Jaysen took a step closer, just enough for Riley to feel the presence of someone who would not be intimidated. "She's not a suspect," he said evenly. "She's a victim. And if you call in backup, make sure you tell them you assaulted a pregnant woman in public, because that's what the world's about to see." Riley's eyes flicked between Jaysen and the swelling crowd. A bead of sweat slid down the side of his face. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "You want to be a hero? Fine. When backup arrives, you can explain your interference, both of you." Jaysen didn't flinch. "Good," he said. "I'll be happy to talk. I'll be even happier when Internal Affairs plays back the videos they're about to see." Tiffany shifted on the bench, wincing in pain. Jaysen immediately turned back to her. "Are you hurting anywhere else? You need an ambulance?" She nodded weakly. "My side. It hurts." Jaysen looked over his shoulder. "Somebody call an ambulance," he shouted. A woman in the crowd nodded and lifted her phone. "Already on it. They're on the way." Riley tried to interject. "She's not going anywhere until—" Jaysen turned sharply, stepping forward, now chest to chest with the officer. "Until what? Until you cause her to lose the baby? Is that your goal here? You keep laying hands on her, and I swear to you, I will make sure your badge is turned in before sunset." The moment froze. Riley's hand hovered near his holster, and for a split second, tension crackled like electricity. The crowd inhaled as one, but he didn't move. Not because he didn't want to, but because something had shifted. The weight of the cameras, the celebrity standing in front of him, the witnesses. It was too much. Sirens in the distance began to rise, a faint wail that quickly grew louder. Tiffany groaned softly, her eyes closing as pain lanced through her side again. Jaysen reached out and steadied her. "You're strong," he said quietly. "You've already made it through more than most. Just hold on a little longer." The crowd parted as 2 more squad cars arrived. Officers jumped out, scanning the scene quickly. One of them, a younger man in his early 30s, approached. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyes darting between Riley, Jaysen, and the woman in obvious pain. Riley stepped forward quickly. Subject was uncooperative. Possible interference by "He kicked her," someone shouted. "He shoved her," another added. Jaysen turned to the younger officer. "My name is Jaysen Statham. You can verify that. I witnessed this man physically assault a pregnant woman who was resting on a bench. He accused her without cause, then kicked her when she didn't move fast enough for his liking." The officer blinked. "Jaysen, like the Jaysen Statham?" "Yeah," someone else said, "and he's telling the truth. We all saw it." The younger officer's gaze turned to Tiffany. Her face was pale, her breaths shallow. "We need medical," he said into his radio. Already the sound of an approaching ambulance could be heard. Riley was now visibly rattled. His hands twitched at his sides. "He's interfering with an investigation." The younger cop looked at him. "What investigation? She's sitting on a bench." Riley's jaw locked, but he had nothing more to say. As the ambulance pulled up and medics rushed over, Jaysen gently helped Tiffany to her feet. She cried out, and the medics surrounded her, helping her onto the stretcher. "I want to ride with her," Jaysen said firmly. "You're a witness?" one of the EMTs asked. "I'm not leaving her alone," he replied. The officer nodded. "We can make that work." As Tiffany was lifted into the ambulance, Jaysen climbed in beside her, his jaw set. As the doors closed, his gaze never left Riley's face. "This isn't over," he said simply. Then the doors shut, and the sirens screamed to life. Back in the park, the crowd was abuzz. People talked in heated whispers, videos uploaded in real time. The younger officer turned to Riley. "Did you really kick her?" he asked, his tone low. "She was resisting," Riley muttered. The younger officer didn't look convinced. Within minutes, the videos went viral. Clips of the confrontation, Jaysen Statham's calm fury, Tiffany's pain, Riley's aggression. Social media caught fire. News outlets picked it up. Jaysen Statham confronts officer over assault on pregnant woman, read one of the headlines before the hour was over. And somewhere in the flashing lights of the ambulance, Tiffany held Jaysen's hand and whispered through tears, "Thank you." Jaysen gave her a soft squeeze. "You don't thank me, not yet. We're just getting started." The emergency room was dimly lit despite the bustle of nurses and the distant beeping of machines. Tiffany lay on the hospital bed, her face pale, her hands resting on her swollen stomach as if shielding her child from the world that had just tried to rip them apart. An IV dripped slowly beside her, and a monitor tracked both her heartbeat and the steady rhythm of her baby's. She was stable, but the pain hadn't fully subsided, physical or emotional. Jaysen Statham stood nearby, arms crossed, his eyes locked on the hospital door like a sentry. He hadn't left her side since they arrived. Every nurse who entered did a double take. Some whispered, but Jaysen didn't care. He wasn't here to be recognized. He was here to protect Tiffany, a woman he had never met until today, and who now seemed like the center of a battle he couldn't walk away from. His jaw was still clenched. His fists, though relaxed, were ready. He was thinking, planning, waiting. A nurse entered with a clipboard, gave Tiffany a gentle smile, and checked her vitals. "The baby's doing okay," she said softly. "You're lucky. That kind of stress could have caused early labor." Tiffany closed her eyes, trying to fight the tears. "I don't feel lucky." Jaysen stepped closer, placing a hand gently on the rail of her bed. "You survived. You fought back. And the world saw it." There was a knock at the door. 2 officers entered, one older, silver-haired, clearly in command, and the younger one from the park, the one who had called for medical help. The older officer introduced himself as Captain Reese. He nodded respectfully to Jaysen and then looked at Tiffany. "Miss Monroe," he began, "we'd like to speak with you about what happened today. We're conducting an internal review. Officer Riley has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Tiffany gave a slow nod, her voice low. "I'll answer your questions, but not alone. He stays." She gestured to Jaysen. "Of course," Reese said, glancing briefly at Jaysen. "We'd appreciate your witness statement as well." Jaysen stepped forward. "You'll have it. And video from dozens of bystanders. Some of it's already gone viral. If this gets swept under the rug, people won't forget. I won't forget." Reese nodded, visibly uncomfortable. "That's not our intention." "Good," Jaysen replied, voice firm. As the officers began taking the statement, Tiffany relived every second of the assault. Her voice trembled as she spoke about the moment Riley kicked her. Jaysen's fists curled again at his sides. He had heard it all before, but hearing it from her, in this sterile room, with the scent of antiseptic in the air, made it worse. When she finished, Reese looked somber. "We've already seen 2 different videos. They corroborate what you're saying," he said. The younger officer nodded. "We'll be submitting this for review with the DA." "And what happens to him now?" Tiffany asked, her voice suddenly stronger. "Is he going to keep that badge?" Reese hesitated. "That's not up to me. But there will be accountability." Jaysen stepped forward. "If there's not, I'll make sure the entire world hears about it. I'll go on every talk show, every press outlet, and I'll make sure people know this department protects officers who attack pregnant women." The threat didn't sound theatrical. It sounded real. The older officer nodded, recognizing the weight of the situation. "Understood." As the officers left, Jaysen turned back to Tiffany. "You were incredible. Most people would have frozen." She gave a bitter smile. "I did freeze. But when he grabbed me, it was like something broke inside, like I couldn't be silent anymore." "You don't ever have to be silent again," he said. "We're going to make sure of that." The following morning, the hospital released Tiffany with a warning to rest and reduce stress. Jaysen refused to let her go home alone. He called for a private car and escorted her himself. Outside the hospital, reporters had already gathered. Word of the incident had spread far beyond the park. It was on national news. Social media had exploded. The phrase, "Jaysen Statham protects pregnant black woman from abusive cop," was trending across platforms. Flashbulbs popped as they stepped out. Tiffany flinched and Jaysen immediately raised a hand, shielding her from the lights. "No questions," he said sharply. They got into the car, and as the doors closed, the world outside was shut away, at least for a moment. At Tiffany's apartment, Jaysen helped her inside and sat with her in the small living room. The walls were bare, the furniture modest, but the space felt lived in, real. She sat on the couch, a pillow clutched against her stomach. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," Jaysen replied. "You just focus on you and the baby. I'll handle the rest." Tiffany looked at him, searching his face for a sign that this was temporary, that he would vanish once the cameras died down. But there was no flinch, no hint of withdrawal. He was there, fully, present. And then her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It read, "We saw what happened. We want to help. Call us." It was followed by the name of a prominent civil rights attorney. Jaysen leaned over and glanced at the screen. "That's a good sign. Doors are opening." "I've never been the kind of person who fought these kinds of battles," she said. "I just wanted to be left alone." "Sometimes," Jaysen said, "the fight finds you, and you've already shown you can handle it." He stood and paced the room for a moment. "But this isn't just about you. It's about every woman who's been told to sit down, shut up, and be grateful. Every person who's been judged by the color of their skin before they opened their mouth. That officer didn't just assault you. He exposed a system that lets people like him feel invincible." Tiffany nodded slowly. "Then let's tear that system down." Jaysen smiled for the first time all day. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." He pulled out his phone and made a call. Within an hour, he had lined up an interview with a national news outlet. They wanted both of them, a live sit-down. Not for drama, but for truth, for exposure, for change. "You sure about this?" he asked her. Tiffany nodded, her eyes clear. "I'm sure. If I stay quiet now, it won't just happen to me. It'll happen to someone else." Jaysen tapped her shoulder gently. "Then let's get ready, because we're not backing down." Outside, the world was watching. Inside, a woman who had been treated like she was invisible was rising, and beside her stood someone who made sure she'd never be alone again. The news studio was brighter than Tiffany expected. She sat under the hot lights with her hands folded carefully in her lap, her belly gently rising beneath her blouse. Across from her sat Jaysen, dressed in a simple dark suit with no tie, the camera crew adjusting lenses around them. The room buzzed with quiet urgency, producers whispering to each other as the countdown to the live interview approached. Tiffany took a slow breath, trying to calm the storm inside her chest. She had never been on television before, never sat in a chair like this to speak not just for herself, but for others who had no voice. Jaysen leaned toward her and offered a reassuring glance. "You've already done the hard part," he whispered. "Now you just speak your truth." The host, a seasoned anchor known for covering civil rights issues, gave them both a nod. 30 seconds, someone called out. Tiffany swallowed hard. A moment ago, she had been a woman recovering from trauma. Now, she was a symbol in a national conversation. The red light blinked on. "Good evening," the anchor began. "Tonight, we're joined by Hollywood actor Jaysen Statham and Tiffany Monroe, a woman who was assaulted by a police officer while pregnant in a public park, a moment that has since gone viral across the country." Tiffany's story was already known, but hearing it summarized on air made her breath catch in her throat. She straightened her back and looked into the camera. "Miss Monroe," the anchor asked gently, "why did you decide to speak out?" Tiffany's voice was steady but low. "Because if I stayed quiet, I'd be telling my child that silence is safer than truth. That pain is something to hide. I couldn't live with that." The anchor nodded, then turned to Jaysen. "Mr. Statham, You intervened in what many have called one of the most disturbing public incidents of the year. Why did you step in?" Jayson's jaw tensed slightly. "Because it was wrong. And because I refuse to live in a world where a pregnant woman can be attacked for sitting in a park and nobody does anything. We can't let people like that officer feel untouchable." The segment continued, and Tiffany spoke about the physical and emotional aftermath. Jaysen used his platform to denounce the abuse of power and call for accountability. The anchor listened, rarely interrupting. The atmosphere was serious, charged, and raw. As the broadcast ended, the anchor looked into the camera. "We'll continue to follow this story closely, because justice doesn't come by chance. It comes when people stand up together." The red light blinked off. Tiffany exhaled deeply, her shoulders trembling with the effort of holding it together. Jaysen reached over and took her hand in silent support. Around them, the crew began to clap, quietly at first, then louder, not out of politeness, but respect. By the time they returned to Tiffany's apartment, the internet had erupted. Hashtags like #JusticeForTiffany and #StathamSpeaks trended globally. News outlets across the country aired segments about the park incident. Political commentators weighed in. Activists shared messages of solidarity. Civil rights organizations launched petitions demanding that Officer Riley be fired and criminally charged. But not everyone was supportive. Within hours, hate messages flooded Tiffany's inbox. Accusations, dismissals, threats. Jaysen received his own share. Angry fans, conspiracy theorists, even anonymous law enforcement defenders calling him a traitor. But he didn't waver. Instead, he grew louder. The next day, Jaysen and Tiffany met with the civil rights attorney who had reached out. Her name was Karen Whitmore, a sharp, tireless advocate who had spent 20 years fighting police misconduct. She sat across from them with folders stacked on the table and fire in her voice. "You have enough evidence to not only sue the city, but to file a civil rights violation under federal law," she said. "We're talking public assault, racial profiling, abuse of authority, all documented." Tiffany shifted in her seat. "Will it actually matter?" Karen leaned forward. "It will if you let me take it all the way." Jaysen nodded. "We're not backing down." Karen smiled. "Good, because the department just issued a statement denying any wrongdoing. They said Officer Riley acted within protocol." Tiffany's chest tightened. "Even with the video?" "They haven't reviewed all of it. They're trying to bury it before it becomes a scandal they can't contain." Jaysen stood up, his fists clenched. "Then we make it too big to ignore." That night, Jaysen released a personal video on his social media accounts. No studio, no crew, just him in Tiffany's apartment, sitting beside her. "I don't usually speak out like this," he began, "but I can't stay silent. I saw what happened to Tiffany Monroe with my own eyes. I saw an officer abuse his power, ignore a woman's pain, and treat her like she didn't matter. And I watched her endure it with more dignity than he'll ever understand. I don't care about backlash. I care about justice. And if we let this pass, then we're just waiting for the next Tiffany to suffer in silence." The video went viral instantly. Celebrities shared it, advocates quoted it, news channels replayed it. The police department, now fully exposed, could no longer maintain its silence. Within 48 hours, Officer Riley was placed under formal investigation by the state attorney's office. A press conference was announced. Jaysen and Tiffany stood together at the press conference, flanked by Karen Whitmore and other community leaders. The steps of City Hall were filled with supporters, posters held high. "Believe Black women. Justice for Tiffany. We are watching." Jaysen addressed the crowd first, his voice calm but thunderous. "This isn't about me. It's about the system that let this happen, and about every person who's ever felt invisible in front of a badge." Then Tiffany stepped forward, her voice stronger than ever before. "I went to the park to rest. I left with bruises, fear, and a fire I didn't know I had. You don't have to be famous to be heard, but sometimes it takes someone standing next to you to make sure the world listens." The crowd erupted in applause, but just beyond the edge of the crowd, standing silently and watching from afar, was Officer Riley. He had been suspended. He had been ordered to turn in his badge. But he had not been arrested. Not yet. And his face, as he watched the woman he once treated like dirt speak to a crowd that now adored her, was twisted in something between disbelief and hatred. Jaysen saw him. He didn't move, didn't approach. He just locked eyes. And what passed between them was not a threat. It was a promise. This isn't over, but neither is our fight. The courtroom was packed. A heavy silence clung to the air as Officer Riley sat at the defendant's table, his face expressionless but pale, flanked by his defense attorney and 2 union representatives. The prosecutor stood across the aisle, folders of evidence neatly stacked, ready to deliver what the public had been demanding for weeks: accountability. Tiffany Monroe sat in the gallery's front row, her hands resting gently on her stomach, now visibly larger with time. Beside her sat Jaysen Statham, wearing a gray suit, no tie, his jaw set with quiet determination. Karen Whitmore, their attorney, sat on the other side, whispering legal notes, but never taking her eyes off Riley. The trial had drawn nationwide attention. Cameras weren't allowed inside the courtroom, but sketches and minute-by-minute reporting filled the media. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of people stood in protest or support, many holding signs with Tiffany's name or stills from the now famous video of her assault. Reporters lined the barricades. The world was watching. Judge Elkins, an older black woman with a stern demeanor and sharp eyes, called the courtroom to order. "We are here to hear testimony in the matter of Officer Kevin Riley, charged with misconduct, assault, and violation of civil rights under federal law." Riley's attorney stood first, trying to minimize the accusations. He called the incident a miscommunication, a misunderstanding heightened by stress, and tried to paint Tiffany as agitated and uncooperative. But each time, the courtroom grew colder, the jury stiffer, because the videos had already spoken. One by one, witnesses were called: the teenage boy who had filmed the confrontation, the woman who had shouted, "You kicked her!" The second officer who had arrived and admitted he felt Riley was out of control. Each testimony added weight to the already sinking defense. Then Tiffany took the stand. The courtroom shifted. Even Riley looked away for a moment. Her voice, though soft, was clear and deliberate. She recounted the pain, the fear, the disbelief of being accused and kicked while vulnerable, and the humiliation of hearing someone demand her to stand up and prove her pain. "I wasn't just hurt," she said. "I was erased, treated like a liar, like a problem, not a person, not a mother, just someone to push away." Karen asked only one final question: "Why are you here today?" Tiffany paused. "Because if I didn't fight, the next woman he targets might not walk away. And because someone stood up for me when I thought no one would." Her eyes flicked briefly to Jaysen. He nodded back. When Jaysen took the stand, the tension was electric. The court was still. Every word he said carried weight, not because he was famous, but because of how simply he spoke. "I didn't step in because I'm an actor. I stepped in because I'm a human being," he said. "Anyone should have done what I did, But too often, no one does. We can't keep pretending this kind of thing is rare. It's not. The defense tried to poke holes, but it was useless. The recordings, the crowd, the medical reports, the officer's own radio logs, all aligned. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. After closing statements, the jury retired. Outside, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Jaysen and Tiffany stood near the steps of the courthouse as supporters chanted and held hands. The press asked for comments, but they declined to speak. Not yet. After only 3 hours, the jury returned. The courtroom filled again. The foreman stood. On the charge of misconduct in public office, guilty. On the charge of assault, guilty. On the charge of violating the civil rights of Miss Tiffany Monroe, guilty. Gasps. Then applause erupted outside the courtroom as news broke. Inside, Tiffany closed her eyes, her shoulders trembling not from fear, but relief. Jaysen gently touched her arm. Karen grinned. Riley slumped in his seat. The judge immediately ordered sentencing to proceed without delay. Within minutes, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison and permanent revocation of his badge. It wasn't a life sentence, but it was accountability, and it was public. In the days that followed, momentum built. The police department launched an internal audit of excessive force cases. 3 officers resigned. 2 more were suspended. Tiffany's story became a case study in mandatory training across the state. Several civil rights groups launched campaigns around her case. She was asked to speak at rallies, universities, and conferences. But she declined most of them. She chose instead to work quietly with Jaysen and Karen to launch something more permanent. The Monroe Initiative, a foundation built to support victims of police abuse, especially women of color. With Jaysen's help, it gained funding, reach, and influence quickly. They built hotlines, offered legal assistance, and started a fellowship program to train women to advocate for others in their communities. Tiffany, once afraid to speak, was now helping others find their voice. Months passed. On a bright morning in spring, Tiffany gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Jaysen was there. So was Karen. The press didn't know. No cameras, just quiet and love and life. She named the baby Hope. As Jaysen held the child for the first time, he smiled softly. "You're going to change the world," he whispered. Tiffany smiled from her bed. She already has. A year later, the Monroe Initiative held its first public summit. Hundreds attended. Tiffany gave a speech that brought the room to tears. Jaysen introduced her, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a survivor, a leader, and a mother who refused to let silence win. The fight was far from over, but the message was clear. One woman, one moment, one witness who refused to walk away, and a world that, for once, chose to listen. What started as injustice turned into a powerful fight for change. But this is just the beginning. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.